Hello, welcome to GGTV. I'm Gracie, one of the co-founders of Ground Grooves. We're gonna talk about a concept today, free the torso. We'll just talk about some ideas about how you can bring a little bit more articulation into the spine and add a new flavor to your floor work practice. Let's do it. Okay, so some of the ideas with this freeing up the torso and finding a little bit more articulation in the spine, in floor work, I think sometimes it can be really down and internal facing. And so I think for me, at least, it's helpful to find more malleability in my torso in order to make it feel more full. And that also allows you to finish your pathways and find more transitional clarity. So some things that I like to think about are that it's basically like a cat-cow in that you have support points in the floor that are holding your weight, and you could just move with your support points and keep your torso really stable, but there's also just so much freedom in the spine. Even if the support points are really stable, there's a lot of freedom. And so even if that becomes more complex, I could transition by keeping my spine really upright and stable, but I could also find a little bit more articulation in the spine by thinking about this support point that exists for me and allowing that to actually feel the weight and free the spine around the place that you have support from. There's another thing that I like to do where if you take your weight back, you feel a lot of gripping, or even just upright, you feel a little bit more gripping. But if you let your weight come forward a bit in this position, you find a lot more freedom in the spine, as well as freedom in the hip flexors and softness in the thighs. A movement that really showcases that is just a really simple back roll, that if you don't allow the torso to move, you cut off a pathway and it feels much more grippy in the hips, grippy in the abdominals. And instead, if you really allow the whole pathway of the torso to exist, it makes the pathway more complete, but it also allows you to find softness in places that you maybe wouldn't have found if you were cutting off those pathways. So freeing up the torso actually allows you, even though you're making a larger pathway with the torso, it's more free, it's more complete, and it has a lot more clarity and functionality. Another place that I find a lot of clarity in a pretty simple movement, but there's lots of clarity in the spine, is just a second slide. So that's the one where you're just taking a hook and then switching to the other hook. And again, you could do that by keeping your spine really upright, and it's right, it's not incorrect, it's totally functional, it's absolutely works. But there's something really nice about thinking about your support point that you're going to have and then mobilizing the spine around that support point. And that frees up the spine in a way that starts to utilize the head. And it also clarifies a transitional pathway, which is that sort of patience of shifting your weight from one hip to the other hip. So it's like the torso is going to teach the pelvis what to do. The torso is initiating a movement from left to right, and the pelvis is responding by being on the left hip and then creasing into the right hip. The other one from a second slide that I like to do that has a lot of head pathway clarity is a second slide back step. So it goes second slide, you have this head circling, and then I'm going to continue my circular pathway around the corner and my head will circle, and that's going to initiate the placement of my next hand. And so I think there's a full, complete revolution that happens in the head. Whoosh, whoosh. And coordinating that with the reach of the hand provides you a lot of clarity, and just adds another layer to what is totally could be this movement, which is great and totally fine and lovely, but it gives you a little extra zhuzh. Something you could do if you feel like you want to work on this concept of freeing up your torso a little bit more is starting to open up your gaze, eyes into the space, with a little more thought, just bringing a little more attention to actually noticing and then clocking the things that you see. I think sometimes we move and we're swirling. It's like, I did not clock one thing I saw, but it's sort of a nice practice to be like, I see Orlando's socks, I see the light switch, I see my belly button, or what I imagine would be a belly button, and I see the floor. And that it's like, it's not just about finding the pathway itself, but it's about like really being present and noticing the things that you see, clocking them and absorbing them, so that you actually did latch your focus onto something and it doesn't just become a really shielded internal practice. Sometimes that's what you want, do it. But this is just another way to approach your floor work practice.